Thank you very much for coming. I've got a lot to talk about, so I'm going to try to cram a lot into 20 minutes, so hopefully it won't be too much. Speak up? Yes. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So my talk tonight is called Echoes of an Exhibition. And the first part is called If These Vessels Could Talk. There's a long-held and incorrect belief that ancient pottery, spun on a potter's wheel like an LP record, might somehow be embedded with ancient sound recordings, echoes of a past long before recording technology ever existed. We may not be able to listen to clay, but we can listen to paper. Educed audio is sound extracted from pictures, such as those produced by a pre-phonograph device called the phonautograph. It's the images made by the phonautograph, which was patented in Paris in 1857, that have allowed us to hear the first ever recording of a human voice, a visual recording made almost 20 years before Edison's phonograph. Objects speak, perhaps not literally as this picture does, but objects do have voices, which means that exhibitions also speak, and in doing so, they leave behind echoes. The walk-through heart. When I was a child, my father took my brother and I to visit a museum in Chicago, and since he was very working class, he didn't take us to the Art Institute of Chicago or the Museum of Contemporary Art or even the Field Museum of Natural History. He took us somewhere very practical, the Museum of Science and Industry. This was a museum that blue-collar parents could feel safe in, a place where children could learn about electricity and coal mining and biology and get inspired to become doctors. Sadly, it failed and I became an artist. And what was the crucible that caused this? Well, I like to think it was this. The museum's walk-through heart, a giant sculpture of a human heart, large enough for both children and adults to walk around inside. When I first got there, I looked up at that gigantic heart and felt my own thumping in my chest. I stepped inside of it and found that all I could concentrate on was the sound, because booming out of speakers built into this anatomical monstrosity was the sound of a human heart, amplified. Boom, 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 boom. I was terrified and entranced, and I think my life changed forever. Incidentally, this is what the Museum of Science and Industry has replaced the walk-through heart with. It's now just a digital projection and a couple of buttons on a touch screen. So just a little editorial comment there. Objects objecting through time and space. In 1961, the sculptor Robert Morris invited the composer John Cage over to his apartment to show him a sculpture that he'd recently completed. Boxed with the sound of its own making is a small cubic wooden box 9 3/4 inches in size. It contains a tape player that plays an audio recording of Robert Morris constructing the box. Cage allegedly sat and listened to the entire 3-hour recording. For those 3 hours, Cage became the living embodiment of what's known as phenomenological adumbration, the witnessing of an object from multiple simultaneous perspectives while still perceiving it to be one single object. And if you've studied any modern art history, this might sound a lot like analytical cubism that was practiced by Braque and Picasso in the early 20th century. But unlike those Cubist paintings, Cage's perspective was moving not just through space, but through time as well. He was perceiving the box not only as a finished sculpture, but also as a sculpture in the midst of its own creation. Morris's sculpture objected to a static view of its own existence across boundaries of space and time. By talking about itself, it became its own echo. Museums in Crisis, or Virtual Reality versus the Rosetta Stone. Quick quiz, what is the biggest threat to museums today?
The internet. Funding.
Ooh, very good. Both are very good and very close. But if you talk to any museum professional, they would probably say the iPhone. There's currently a lot of museological hand-wringing about this. Will the public stop visiting museums if museums don't embrace digital culture? Museologists often, and by that I mean constantly, refer to museums as being in a state of crisis. This crisis is usually described as one of connection with their audience, a crisis of relevance. And in the early 21st century, museums certainly seem justified in their paranoia about being overtaken by home technology, specifically mobile technology. Museums see people everywhere abandoning real-life experiences, retreating into an online world of selfies and memes. And if you can't beat them, you might as well join them. So museums have started installing technology all over the place. Crisis averted, right? Except museums aren't actually in that much of a crisis, at least not a crisis of attendance. In 2015, just 3 museums in the City of London, the V&A, the Natural History Museum, and the Science Museum, saw more visitors between the 3 of them combined than the entire city of Venice, one of the most popular tourist destinations in Europe. Last year, I attended a virtual reality weekend at the British Museum. It took place in the Samsung Digital Discovery Center, and all the technology on view there displayed variations on the same virtual reality presentation of a 4,000-year-old Bronze Age roundhouse dwelling. Visitors were carefully watched over by attendants wearing Samsung t-shirts. The Digital Discovery Center was set up to handle long queues of visitors. However, I didn't have to wait longer than about 5 minutes to get in, and I went there on a Sunday morning, one of the more popular times to go to the museum. When I left the VR area, I walked over to the museum's ancient Egyptian gallery across the Great Hall. There was a queue snaking out of the gallery doorway and spreading out into the hall, a throng of people desperate to get a glimpse of the Rosetta Stone, a hunk of rock in a glass vitrine. Maybe museums really don't need to become an echo of the technology that their visitors use at home after all. Overtones, resonance, and repetition, the polyphonic echoes of exhibition design. Overtone singing, where one person simultaneously sings 2 notes at once, is thought to have originally developed in ancient Mongolia. This is what it sounds like when someone sings a simple overtone scale.
So this was the overtone scale on one fundamental.
And this is a video of what it looks like inside the throat of an overtone singer while they sing Beethoven's Ode to Joy. Overtone singing produces 2 simultaneous notes from a single audio source. When these notes are heard at the same time, they resonate against each other, causing vibrations and tones that neither note on their own produces. By virtue of being heard together, something new, something previously unheard, is produced. Museum curators place objects next to each other inside exhibitions on purpose. These juxtapositions resonate off each other. Something new, something previously unseen or previously unknown, becomes apparent by placing these objects alongside each other. These resonances are the echoes that museums would love for their visitors to carry home with them. Portable museums, echoes beyond architecture. What we think of as the contemporary museum developed out of the 17th century tradition of cabinets of curiosity. Visitors to those cabinets of curiosity were given a private tour and were encouraged to touch the objects, to smell them, listen to them, sometimes even to taste them. When museums opened to the public in the 18th century, that all changed. Visitors were only allowed to look. Museums became silent places. And the British Museum became a place where you could not give money to servants, apparently. In the 1930s, Marcel Duchamp created a portable cabinet of curiosity, a museum in a suitcase containing reproductions of all of his most important artworks. The first of Duchamp's portable museums was given to the art collector Peggy Guggenheim in 1941. You can now buy a facsimile of it as a pop-up book on Amazon for about 30 pounds. In the 1940s, the French writer and art theorist André Malraux proposed a new form of museum he described as a museum without walls. According to Malraux, due to the new affordability of mass market printing, art museums could and should be replaced by books. In 1949, the artist Joseph Cornell, whose work developed out of his passion for collecting, created a piece he simply called Museum. It was a box containing a series of closed containers, and visitors were encouraged to shake the boxes and listen to them to try to determine what was inside each of them. One of the containers, however, contained nothing but silence. In 2015, I opened the Museum of Portable Sound. Not only does this museum celebrate portable sound technology, it is itself portable, existing on a single iPhone. My museum's motto is bringing the culture of sound to the public one listener at a time. And that's because I sit with each visitor while they visit the museum and let them look at the museum's catalog for guidance as they walk around inside the collections. No sound files are distributed over the internet. The only way to visit the Museum of Portable Sound is to make an appointment to sit and listen. It even includes temporary exhibitions which, when their run is over, are deleted from the phone, banished to the realm of memory. The exhibition catalog as printed echo. When a museum exhibition ends, all we're left with are memories. Well, that and a catalog. Museum exhibitions are collaborative projects, culminations of the work of many people with a variety of skills. These people work to bring together art or artifacts to tell a story, to answer questions, or to ask new ones, and to invite its viewers to participate in that process by viewing the results and providing their own feedback. There's one really important contradiction embedded within the notion of the museum exhibition. These are temporary presentations by institutions interested in permanence. Even displays of the permanent collection will be refreshed from time to time as new items are acquired or others are deaccessioned. Museum exhibitions are also compromises, primarily due to budgetary and temporal constraints. Exhibitions are human endeavors, and as such, inevitably fall victim to human error. And I think this is what gives them their charm, to be honest. A misspelled object label, a wobbly vitrine, a touchscreen that constantly needs to be rebooted. This is all evidence of the tension between the temporary and the permanent. When possible, museums publish catalogues of their exhibitions. Some exhibition catalogs are lavish, full color, with professional photography. Others are brief, low-budget pamphlets handed out for free. More often than not, the only physical remains of an exhibition after it's closed tend to be the catalog. But a catalog is two-dimensional and linear, and it lacks the other sensory elements that are crucial to the experience of an exhibition. The juxtaposition of physical objects in space, the temperature and smell of the room, the sound of footsteps and voices reacting to the objects on display, the videos or audio recordings that supplement the silent objects inside the vitrines. Exhibition catalogs are not the exhibitions themselves. Neither could they replace them as Malraux wanted. Catalogs are echoes of the exhibition they represent, tastefully printed ruins on paper, the skeletal remains of the work that went into the curation of a particular gathering of objects in a particular place and time. A catalog is a method of recording, but like all recordings, it's no substitute for the original. A map of echoes, hearing enlightenment. A recording is never authentic. It can only ever be a facsimile. It's not the original event. It's a new event unto itself. A recording is a piece of mediated history, a representation of the barrier between reality and memory. Museums are also mediated history. Since the Enlightenment, museums have been categorizing nature and culture via the objects they collect and display. And those early categorizations have profoundly influenced the way we look at the world even today. Their methods were far from perfect and grew out of the social and political climate of the time, a time of imperialist expansion, institutionalized racism, and deep-seated gender biases. The Enlightenment Gallery at the British Museum in London attempts to recreate the sensibility of those earliest museums. And to be honest, it's refreshing. We don't usually get to see physical objects laid out like a Google Images search. It's refreshingly warm compared to the sterile aesthetic of a modernist white cube gallery. Cabinets of curiosity feel warm and inviting in the post-digital age. But as you walk through the Enlightenment Gallery, it becomes clear that there are important objects missing there, and there are important voices missing there. Categorizing culture leads to as many omissions as it does inclusions. As part of my art practice, I make sound maps of museums. When I decided to make one of the Enlightenment galleries at the British Museum, I decided to echo this idea of omission within the structure of the map itself. I recorded the Enlightenment Gallery for a whole day, recording a full hour of sound in each of the 7 different sections of the gallery. After that, I time compressed each hour into only 7 minutes, without changing the sound's pitch or applying any effects. So the result of this is a 49-minute piece of echoes, tiny little samples of the original sounds, whipping by the listener, sometimes registering, sometimes not. The majority of the sounds are lost, yet they're all still there somehow as well, like ghosts. It's an approximation of an experience, an analog to the fate of museum objects, taken out of time and context, represented as an echo of what they once were, still having a voice but a newly distorted one. Echoes in ruins. In the year 1407, in the city of Lisbon, Carmel Convent opened for its first liturgy. In the year 1755, on the morning of November 1st, a massive earthquake decimated Lisbon. Up to 100,000 people were killed in a day. The quake set the city aflame. 85% of Lisbon's architecture was destroyed. Carmel's church was destroyed. The convent was badly damaged. Enlightenment-era philosophers debated the meaning and purpose of this catastrophe. The long-term study of the effects of the quake gave birth to modern-day seismology. During the recovery, Lisbon's government decided to leave Carmel Convent in ruins as a living memorial. In the year 1863, the ruins of Carmel Convent were donated to the Association of Portuguese Archaeologists, who made the church their office and turned the ruined convent building into a museum. This museum was Portugal's attempt at a so-called universal museum, like the British Museum, dedicated to collecting and categorizing the material culture of the entire world. In the year 2016, I stopped by Carmel Convent on my way to meet a friend for dinner. All I knew was that Carmel Convent was a ruined church and it had a museum in it. Since I make audio recordings inside museums, I really wanted to record there. The quiet inside the open-air church was absolutely gorgeous. There were few other visitors there at the time, and I unpacked my digital recorder and began recording. And then some guy showed up to cut the grass. In an instant, my bliss was shattered by the buzzing of an electric hedge trimmer. This, of course, is what is known on the internet as a first world problem. Compare my crappy field recording incident with the large-scale destruction of ancient cultural sites, not to mention the obscene amount of human rights abuses currently being undertaken by religious extremists in Syria, and it tends to put things in perspective. This past April, the 1800-year-old triumphal arch of the ancient Syrian city of Palmyra was resurrected through the magic of digital archaeology and 3D printing. It was displayed in Trafalgar Square after being destroyed in October of 2015 by the loosely organized band of Middle Eastern religious extremists known as Daesh or ISIS. They destroy or sell off the antiquities that they find religiously offensive to inspire fear and fund their operations. The resurrected arch was a fascinating paradox. It was a brand new ruin. Like all good echoes, this new triumphal arch was substantially different from its original. It was about 2/3 the size and made of a different material. And it was also kind of unceremoniously displayed inside riot fencing. When I visited the installation, there was a sizable crowd there, with people posing for photos under the arch, taking selfies with it, knocking on it, talking about it. There were people of Middle Eastern descent there who were smiling very proudly, obviously thrilled to see a bit of their culture displayed in this most British of town squares, a scant few weeks before the semi-miraculous election of the city's first Muslim mayor. The triumphal arch's imperfect, 3D printed echo resonated strongly against the hand-carved Nelson's column, creating new architectural and cultural relationships via their newfound proximity. Epilogue and Incantation. I began this talk by wondering whether sound might be embedded within ancient pottery, and I know it's impossible, but I can't help but fantasize about it a bit. What you're looking at are ancient Parthian period incantation bowls in the collection of the Kelsey Museum of Archaeology at the University of Michigan in the United States. Created in the 3rd century CE in what is now Iraq, bowls such as these were inscribed with what appears to be a prayer in some kind of obscure ancient dialect. In reality, however, these are inscriptions of pure gibberish, intended to make the priests who use these bowls appear to be the keepers of some secret mystic language. They're symbols that empowered a fraud. Luckily, I've already managed to conjure some sound from one of these incantation bowls when I asked an artist and violinist who's a friend and colleague of mine to interpret one of the bowls as a graphic score during a performance we did at the Kelsey Museum. her performance was just an echo of what might have been. Maybe instead of concentrating on the impossible, we should try to listen to the actual possible. I would really love it if the Natural History Museum here in London would let us listen to the echo of the ocean inside these seashells that were collected by Charles Darwin. What objects do you wish you could listen to? What echoes would you curate into your own exhibition? That's it. Thank you.
The one thing I thought was interesting is about saying that people may be, you know, the thought that people are drawing away from museums, then showing that the Samsung exhibition, actually people aren't. And I think there is this sort of resonance when you're with an object. There's something about being in the space that someone created, seeing that chisel mark, being in the room with that ancient object. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you had any thoughts about that sort of human drive to not look at the virtual reality, but actually be in the physical space of an object. And if there is some sort of relation to the audio that you feel, whatever that thing you pick up on with audio, do you feel that visually, or do you think it's separate? Did I? Oh no,
I definitely feel it visually as well. But I think museums are multi-sensory. I don't think you walk into a museum and you just look, or you just listen, or you just smell it, or, you know, and I know you're not supposed to touch things, but everyone touches stuff.
But we do.
I know. Oh, I know, believe me. So yeah, I think that there is a visual aspect to that as well. I mean, it comes back to what Walter Benjamin talks about, the aura of authentic objects. How that's something that would allegedly keep artwork going in the age of mechanical reproduction. And even though everyone is addicted to these things completely, I swear, people still will, depending on the object, they will still be drawn to physical objects. And they will always find virtual things to be virtual, no matter how impressive the graphics are. And honestly, the graphics at the British Museum Virtual Reality Weekend felt like the VR that I used to look at in 1999.
Really?
It was really bad. It was like playing Myst. It was like, I couldn't believe it. And they had it in this tent, and it was supposed to be immersive, and they refused to close the flap on the front of the tent. So it was a white screen inside, and you've got the Great Hall on the outside of you, which is white. Yeah. And so you couldn't even see any contrast in the image. It was just, and anyway, I'm a very cranky old man when it comes to virtual reality, so I should stop and have another question.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh.
I just wanted to make a comment. It's quite uncanny. I just come from a lecture at the Catalogue Institute by David House.
Ah, I wanted to go to that.
Yeah, and he was talking about exactly this, about sensory museums.
Yeah.
And the return of the sort of museums allowing people to touch objects and interact with them and taste them.
They're trying, but it's really hard. It's like pulling teeth. I mean, they want to do it. They really want to do it, but it's so alien. And the people who are trying to get it done, I think, end up beating their heads against the wall a lot, because museums hear that they should do it. There are people there who know that they should do it, but the institutions are so big and bureaucratic and have been operating in one way for so long. I mean, there's a lot of sound going on in museums now, but usually it's relegated to the sort of late events, like outside of normal operating hours. So it's like, you can do that at night when it's cool, but during the day, you know, we are serious and we study and we whisper. So I think it'll happen, but it's going to take a while.
Have you seen the new Bjork digital exhibition?
No.
Because of VR, it's interesting. There are two types of VR they have. One is is basically an iPhone
Strapped to your face.
strapped to your face. There is another one where you actually are turning around and the sound is changing as you're moving. And I talked to somebody who went to see the same thing and they had a completely different experience to me. They actually looked inside Bjork and I didn't even think of doing that. So you can do it. And there also is a room where you have two screens showing different things which are synced with, I think it's 18 speaker surround sound, so depending where you're standing and you're invited to move around inside. And there are also more old-fashioned things where there are pipe organs and things that you can kind of make the sound with and alter it depending on where you put the pipes, which to me seems a lot more interactive with the sound.
Yeah, I think you may have picked up, I'm a little cynical. And when people use the term interactive, I tend to think that what they really mean is digital. Because that's really what people claim that things are interactive if it's on a phone and you tap it. That's not interactive. That's, it's a video game. Was Asteroids interactive? You were touching a button. I mean, it's the exact same thing. So I've heard several people describe the Bjork show to me, and I haven't gone to it yet. It sounds really boring to me. It's just things like I've heard like 36 channel multi-speaker systems, and after the first 5 minutes, I've got 2 ears. You can make the same effect with 4 speakers.
But the thing I found from seeing 2 screens at the same time, you can't look at both of them with one eye. You can try and just kind of see both, but you always concentrate on different things. So your experience will not be the same as the person next to you. And that I found a lot more. I suppose a lot. I guess it's that I'm actually choosing. This is the thing I find. I play around with virtual reality at home. I find it very interesting that in some ways there's no focus, or at least it's hard to find a thing that you're focusing on.
Yeah.
And the stone milker thing that she does, where she splits into 3, and so you can choose which one of her you're looking at. And what is kind of curious in that is that although there's 3 of her, the background, because there's waves on the beach, is all doing the same thing. So it's it looks simple on the outside, but there are more things going on. And the other thing I felt from it on a more emotional thing is that actually it feels, because she's sort of singing to you, and because you have this immersive feeling, you actually feel like it's just you and her. Which I found
and all the other people in the room.
There's nothing else there. You don't see. There's no artifice. There's no cameras. There's no nothing. It's just you in the middle with her and the landscape. And it feels quite minimal, but also emotional in another way.
No, I understand, and I don't mean to. I'm not trying to belittle your experience.
No, but it's interesting to hear a terrible VR experience which doesn't actually engage in the same way.
I've never had a good VR experience, and I've had a lot of them, and I think there's something inherently pointless about it to me. But I think it could be because I tend to be very cynical.
2 points now. One, I did some VR testing for PS4. It was incredible. It was mind-blowing. Like literally that whole sensation, playing with all the different bits and pieces in my brain was incredible. And I'm going to buy it when it comes out.
I'd love to see it.
So good. And the other thing is, I work in a museum, and we ban the use of mobile phones in the museum. Because
really?
It takes oh, we get so cross. Because we are a very nice museum, and if you're walking around with a phone, you're not looking at the objects, you're not experiencing our building, and that really annoys us, and you could bump into things or whatever else, but actually, no, don't, your phone is not what this is about, this is about the museum. People get so cross.
Oh yeah.
Because they're like, well, I want to look up something. It's like, this is an interactive museum. There's a person in every room. You are told every time you meet someone, ask me a question, I will tell you anything you want to know about this museum.
But that's not interactive. That's not
interactive. That is interactive.
No, it's not digital.
we now have a token digital display because we've gone through a whole reopening. So we've actually opened up some places that have been closed off since the 1800s, and we've actually documented the whole process, and that's been quite exciting. So you should come and visit us.
Which museum is it?
Sir John Stone's.
Oh. Okay, I might have to talk to you after, because I tried to approach you people about doing something there.
I'd like to point out it's the museum. Don't say it.
No, I love the John Stone's
But
Museum.
that is the thing that people really, really get quite cross with.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
don't understand when we say to them, you cannot use your phone in this museum. This is not, it's not because of the works of art you can't take photographs of. It's not that, it's all online. You can actually go through our archives. We've got like 50,000 Robert Adam drawings. You can have a look through online, you know. So it's there, but you don't need to take a photo.
My favorite mobile phone museum story that I have now, because I spend way too much time in museums doing stupid things. One day, and this is again the British Museum, I went and there was a specific piece in the Egyptian collection that I wanted to look at. And so I walked in, bumped into the Rosetta Stone, and I wanted to turn right and go that way. And in order to go that way, it was so crowded that the only way that I could walk was between two benches that had groups of people sitting on them facing each other. And I wasn't walking slowly. I wasn't like stopping to look at anything. I was just trying to get from the Rosetta Stone all the way to the other side of the gallery. So I was walking as quickly as I could. I'm tall, I walk quickly. And in the time it took me to walk between two benches, apparently I got in the way of multiple photographs because they were photographing each other. And they started yelling at me as I was walking. They said, "Get out of the way!" And I was walking really fast. Like it couldn't have been more than 2 seconds to get from the beginning to the end. And multiple people on those benches yelled to get out of the way of their photos. I love it. They're obsessed. They can't actually look at stuff. It has to be through a phone. It's unreal. But I mean, it's the way people act now. And that's the very difficult thing that I think every museum struggles with, because some museums love it and they encourage it. And I don't know if you saw there's a photo going around, I think it just happened yesterday, of a group of people standing in front of Hillary Clinton, and they're all taking selfies with her. So they all have their back to her. And she's standing on a little pedestal going like this to get in their phones. And every single one of them is going like this. And it's being analyzed and, talked about in the news as, this is culture now. And no, they're not being rude. They're not ignoring her. They're bonding with her, even though they have their back to her. And, it's like, but, Miles Davis used to play with his back to the audience. It's this weird.
Well, we do this other thing where we have our late night events, and that's when we encourage photographs and hashtags.
Yeah, of course.
It's free marketing. It's not because we're cool.
Oh,
we
yeah.
are like the uncoolest museum. We are like massive nerds. We have no line. And but that is our late nights. It's like, right,
yeah.
This is the hashtag. Use it. Take photographs. We tell people you're never allowed to take photographs in a museum. You can take photographs.
Do you have a DJ on your late nights?
Do you want one? Do you want
No, God, no.
We've got 2 nights that we might need some help with.
Well, okay, sure. Okay, sorry.
Can I just ask one quick question?
Yes.
Just bringing it back to hearing the sound of objects. Have you ever attached a slinky to your ear?
So a slinky to it?
A metal slinky to your ear. Don't make them
Oh yeah. Oh, I did that all the time when I was a kid. They're fantastic.
But so objects do.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Thank you, John.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.